We are live. This is Senate Finance, February 7th. And we're gonna take some testimony on S 230, an act relating to Medicare Advantage and Medicare supplemental insurance plans. And Mike Fisher's here. Good afternoon.
Joe Davis turned down our invitation.
We've been trying to get up with the United Healthcare. So far, we haven't reached.
Good afternoon, Mike Fisher, Healthcare Ad. Let me, I don't, I've been here. Yeah.
No, I don't think so this year.
Yes, it's good to be here. Half the table is missing, but that's okay.
They're all chairs, or two of them are, and they are
Yeah.
frequently tied.
You notice it's only this side of the table that's present.
It's, you know, we're,
Make sure everyone is aware of that.
Zane's
Yes.
noting that, right?
I am
I'm not worried about it putting over, you know.
Oh, yeah.
So, S230, first off, let me just recognize, as is true with everything in Medicare, there's always multiple names for things. You'll hear me say, tend to use the term Part C to describe this program, not Medicare Advantage. It is indeed called Part C. I don't like to use the word term Medicare Advantage, because I think it's more advertising
Okay.
than the truth. And it leads to all kinds of people saying this.
Medicare Part C, otherwise, no.
Otherwise known as, generally speaking, the HCA is in support of what this bill seeks to do. And I'll recognize upfront, the first 3 sections of the bill are about the signatories, and whether they can ever be put in a Part C plan. And I will
I think we'll have the union in talk.
stand aside from that topic. I think the union can talk about that topic. I think, I'll just say on a high level at the Healthcare Advocates Office, it's not uncommon that we have people calling for help who thought they were in a good Part C plan that was meeting their needs. And then when they get sick, when they need care, they discover that it doesn't meet their needs. And just on a high level to recognize, if you don't need care, you'll love your insurance, the premium is low. That's the only thing you care about, the premium is low.
Right.
When you need care, you start to think about networks and co-pays and exposure and all that stuff. And so.
Very interesting.
This is one of my weakest knowledge areas, and my question about Part C is, maybe you're gonna elaborate on this. And once you start one, you can't switch out, or there's a lot of hindrances. What is the rationale for that? Is that a statewide decision? What is the policy rationale?
So
Hoping we get to that.
much of the regulation and law around Part C is federal. And we are preempted. Generally, you have 2 options. You can be in traditional Medicare and buy a supplemental plan, which the state does have some jurisdiction over. There's all kinds of federal controls over that as well, but Medicare is not free. Medicare costs a great deal has a great deal of out-of-pocket exposure. And so people either go traditional Medicare and buy a supplemental plan, or they go Part C. They don't need a supplemental plan, it's wrapped in. And so,
It replaces Medicare
yes,
tradition.
and so if you're leaving a Part C plan, you need to be able to get back into the traditional Medicare and its supplemental plan. And that is the hook, I'll just say Section 4 of the bill changes the open enrollment period for Medicare supplemental plans. Today in Vermont, you get 1 6-month open enrollment period for a supplemental plan. When you after you buy a Part B plan, you get a 6-month period to get in the door in a supplemental plan. And if you don't do that, you are not guaranteed issue or community rating.
Okay, so if, when you get Medicare, you've got 6 months to get your supplemental. If you don't do it in that 6 months, then you're not guaranteed you can get it or get it at a rate, yeah.
You're subject to medical underwriting
Okay,
and,
there's a big hook to make you sign up.
that's right. I plan to say this later, but see if the Blue Cross is coming in the room, I'll get to that later. Current law is you have 6 months. Some states have gone to, open in New York, the lake had just open enrollment. A number of other states have, somewhat more limited, enrollment periods for Medicare supplemental. In previous years, I've come before this committee, we've had very much the same conversation. Blue Cross and I have sound a little bit like a broken record. I say something like, hey, it's good for the rest of the healthcare system. We deal with adverse selection by giving people a short period of time when they can buy an insurance product, and lock them out for the other times. Why isn't that also good for Medicare supplements? So in previous years, we have argued for an annual open enrollment period. We lost. Blue Cross and others, and I think the department came in and said that will raise the costs. This year, this bill provides for a narrower opening that gives people an opportunity to buy a Medicare supplement plan if they are transitioning from a Medicare Part C plan. So it gives people an opportunity to get out of their Part C plan if they discover it's not good for them. And let me add,
Could you have it for 10 years and then find out you're sick and you don't want to have to drive to your doctor in New Hampshire? And then get out?
in this language, yes.
Okay,
Let me, I haven't said it, Medicare currently, and Vermont currently provides for a 1 year opportunity to get out of a Part C plan. So now, if you sign up for a Part C plan, you've got a year. If you discover it's not good for you within that first year, you can move back over to the regular Medicare market. So this bill would be sort of after that.
right, anytime or during open enrollment.
This bill is, the way it's framed up, is for a period of time after your birthday. So it is known in other states as the birthday rule. And it's 60 days within a 60-day period after the birthday. So it gives.
Standard.
Current law, tell me, with current law, if you are in Medicare Part C, and it's been more than a year, can you switch over to Part B? Or
So-
to,
Traditional Medicare, yes, and you can shop for a Medicare supplement plan and you're subject to medical underwriting.
what does that mean?
So it may cost you more, or some insurance companies have the right to not offer you.
So within 6 months, you don't have medical underwriting, you get a lower rate generally. If you try and come back because you've got a really serious heart condition that's gonna take some major surgery and you're not worried about dental and eyes anymore. You come back with that major clause, that's gonna be in your underwriting, which I think protects the fund. And, if enough people did that, the cost for everybody else would go up.
Well, isn't the more common reason for making the change out of Part C is because the patient finds they have a medical condition that is either not treated at full price or requires them to go to a doctor in, Alaska or whatever. But their conditions impose that they learn about. And that's one of the reasons why the policy was so cheap in the first place, that they didn't pay attention to. By making that change, you typically are bringing over back to Medicare someone who is a higher cost patient.
Possibly, yeah.
Because they would have stayed with Advantage if that were not the case,
I mean,
by and large.
So you're right, people get motivated to leave a Part C plan that's not meeting their needs. That may be because of the out-of-pocket exposures, they're sick and their needs are high. It may also be that their network is insufficient to treat a relatively inexpensive. It's not necessarily expensive. It is also network.
Yeah.
We were joking earlier about Joe Namath. There are a great deal of complaints in this world about people feeling lied to, deceived, falsely advertised to, and
For the Part C.
for the parts. And so, even very capable, astute healthcare consumers make this mistake.
Because when you're 65, eyeglasses and dental and maybe hearing aids cost more than you're healthy now. You're not planning on having a
But-
heart condition.
But Senator, I'll acknowledge the argument you just made is exactly the argument you'll hear from the carriers, that it will provide for some adverse selection. And I acknowledge that, I'm not going to deny it. I also think it is cruel and unusual to lock somebody into a plan that's not meeting their needs.
Well, because I guess they could have read all the details in the fine print at the bottom of the TV screen.
The little old lady yelling, I could get more and I'm not.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or less.
I predict a very traditional discussion about section 4 of the bill, in which we just laid out the discussion.
Thank you.
I want to acknowledge that this bill could attempt to use, I think, all of the different possible avenues to try and protect Vermonters from Part C plans that aren't meeting their needs. I should say, it would be remiss if I didn't say, some people like their Part C plans. They get in Part C plans, it meets their needs, they never have any problems.
Right.
Maybe I should say they're not all created equal.
Yep.
Section 5 of the bill, tasks the Department of Financial Regulation, to take all measures not prohibited by federal law, to regulate the advertising. I think you need to hear from DFR directly on that, but I think their avenues for regulating Part C advertising at this moment are slim. But just the same, tasking them with doing that in compliance with what's allowed by federal law, I think is a good thing. I also think that you've already passed in recent years, sort of the concept of asking DFR, and my office, by the way, of doing something of a counter detailing. Working against providing people with good information.
Maybe we get the government, who's providing his doctor, somebody who's a local celebrity to do a public interest spot.
Okay.
That's on as often as Joe Namath is.
And you hear me at public meetings say over and over again, don't trust somebody on a panel, don't trust, and certainly don't only take advice from someone who's trying to sell you something. There are people out there who are
And they
available.
call now and an insurance agent will sign you up.
Right.
So it doesn't sound like you're even running through a Vermont regulated insurance agent that we could require that they.
I think they are regulated by the state, are they not? Even though they may be in Nevada, because they're regulated, they're registered with
It's a
16 or
registered
17
here,
or
but
40
You're
states.
calling
To upgrade them.
universal health care on the helpline.
Right.
You may get a register, but I don't think we can tell them, because they're not regulated here, that they have to disclose that you might find.
So my final comment on section 5 is I think it's a good idea. I think you would, if we were really to try and have an impact to counter the relentless barrage of advertising, it would take some resources.
Yes, it would.
If you were gonna ask my office to do more of a job, we do a couple Facebook posts
Yeah.
and, go to community meetings. but-
That's not gonna do it.
Right.
And it's the open enrollment period.
Yes,
I haven't seen Joe Namath or any of the other guys since December 1st, I think. But in November, in some channels, they're on back to back. Yeah.
so section 6 of the bill is something that. Section 6 and 7. And it has always been a question mark of mine, to what extent we're preempted from so much about Medicare Advantage by federal law. But we do regulate brokers. And so to what degree can we have an impact on the sale promotion of Part C plans through our regulation of brokers? I was not a part of the drafting of this section of the bill. I asked the question, sort of the broad question I just posed here, to what degree can we control the sale of Part C plans through our regulation of brokers? And what came out the other side from Senator Harrison, is that right? Is a straight prohibition on commissions, service fees, brokerage, for the sale of Part C. And while I love it, the advocate's office loves it. I'm sure, and I honestly, I immediately end up with questions, and I'm not sure I can find the answer to this, and I haven't had an opportunity to really look at it, but, what's the definition of a broker here? If, I'll use MVP, UVM are promoting their Part C plan, are they in effect a broker, or are they an
They're
insurer?
getting a commission, so,
Yeah, are they getting a commission even?
but I'm wondering if we shut out brokers. That people who want to buy them are going to the telephone on the TV, and we lose any chance we have to require that there are disclosures before you accept. So,
So I want to say that I like the concept. But it might need some massaging to get right.
Well, just one question, and this you may want to hear from the department about, is what are the responsibilities of brokers who sell these plans in terms of disclosure? And it may well be that the disclosure that you are entering a network that has the people who are in our network in it, that the plan has certain things that it covers, and you can read that on pages 76 to 114 of the brochure that we'll send you, et cetera. And that the disclosures are in fact there already to the brokers who are all registered in Vermont, legally registered as registered brokers in Vermont, even though they may be in Nevada. And I'm just not sure if that, all of that is going to help a lot to make it more stringent.
And so part of my response to that is, if there are regulations of them, it's not sufficient. Or enforced. I don't know.
or
Well, I guess the question would be, what would those disclosures say that are not being said now?
Yeah.
Because it's how you say it and the tone of voice. But the notion that you have, brokers who are in our network, and our network is the second largest network in Vermont that sells Medicare Advantage plans or whatever.
So there's one concept at the end of section 7, that it's not a disclosure, it's a prohibition, but it goes in this direction. And that says that, that a broker can't market or sell a Part C plan to someone who's on Medicaid or a Medicare savings plan. So this is a low income person. And while technically you can be on Medicaid and MSP and on a Part C plan, the MSP in particular is designed to work with traditional Medicare. And so we hear from people all the time for whom it just doesn't work. And so in my, these are sort of the most vulnerable exposed people who who, and with a small adjustment to the language on page 80, are substantially covered by our loan programs, by our Medicaid. Medicaid programs.
Small. Word change.
So what it says is, or on an MSP, on a Medicare savings plan. And I think to be sort of more technically accurate, it would be those people who are on a qualified Medicare beneficiary, the QMB level of the MSP plan. Am I speaking a different language here? QMB is the level of Medicare savings plan that includes cost sharing. And so that is the level that is Medicaid-like. And so people get their cost sharing supports and they get their Medicare premiums paid for. And so
So you're on Medicare, you're below 65. And this plan is helping you pay your Medicare premiums.
did you say you're below 60?
This is over 65?
This is over 65 or on Medicare due to a disability.
Okay, okay, so you are receiving it. The fee that you pay, isn't that for your, once you get Medicare Part A, state Medicare, is there a fee in that if you're not working?
That, for the vast majority of people, no.
No.
If they have enough work quarters, 40 work quarters, I guess, they,
If you qualify?
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so these
Yes.
are people that it's your Medicare supplement plan, that fee?
So Medicare B is the one that does have a premium
Yes,
and is for generally outpatient services. And it does have a premium that adds up to $2,000 a year. Which doesn't sound bad for a lot of people, but for very low income people.
that's a lot, so that this program helps them save and subsidizes that payment so that they can keep their supplemental insurance costs. Okay. Yeah, those are people I don't think we wanna.
So,
Yeah.
so I think there's something in section 7 that I think is reasonable, and I'm not sure how much opposition there'll be to in this building. And I also think there's something nodded here that I think there's consensus. Looking over at Blue Cross. And that is that currently Blue Cross offers a safety net Medicare supplement. And it costs more, but you can get it anytime. You can be in the hospital. And Blue Cross is not required by law to do it, and they're currently doing it, and it's a good thing. It's a really good thing, and I think you'd find broad support for enshrining that in law. Or at least
We'll hear from Luke.
I think the healthcare advocate's office thinks that would be a good thing.
And this is a safety net so that if you get caught without Part B, you're switching back from an Advantage plan? No,
So you have to have Part B,
okay,
if you get caught without a supplement plan.
okay,
You're able to buy one, even if you're very sick.
Okay.
I said earlier, that many of these plans don't have guaranteed issues, and that's true. This is one that I think the practice is to have guaranteed issues. It still costs more, they still
Yeah.
charge you.
yeah, if you're there and, yeah, there's
Yeah.
a greater risk,
So,
okay,
those are my thoughts on the bill.
thank you. This is our first really in-depth on this. Okay,
And maybe I just part of saying over, for, Vermont has had a low rate of Part C penetration.
Yeah.
It's growing like crazy.
insurance is costing more,
And
and if you're seeing a major
there's
thing,
some new products being marketed.
there are.
And
Dental and eye is where
Mhm.
you get it, when you can be to the gym paid, yeah. It sounds pretty good until you get real sick and find out the specialist is in
Yeah. And I'll just also say, you know, in the rest of the world of healthcare, we would never say you're stuck in your plan for 20 years. We would never imagine saying that. In this place, we do. In this place, we don't give people options as their life changes. And so the bill, I think, seeks to or maybe I should just say, I think we have to be able to find a way to both protect the market, but, you know, protect the supplemental market for medical selection and give people some option for it.
We will talk about that. Ms. Ross, I'll give you equal time. I don't have all time today, but we're not gonna work this out today. Any other questions?
You weren't gonna say all in favor?
No, not just, we try and have a neutral witness before we go.
All right, thank you.
But at least you didn't tell us horoscopes
I didn't have,
and then vote. Okay,
thank you.
thank you. Okay, that's what we've got on this, and we are right on time. So we've got an hour to do captive insurance. And committee, I will tell you what happened.
Short sentence, but.
It's a very short time. We have the captive insurance bill from the house. The EFR housekeeping bill, the information, there was a glitch in timing and it wasn't gotten out in time to be numbered as a bill. So the house first asked if we would take it, and we went through a committee bill and we're past the deadline. And so the final thing was, would we consider it attaching it to captive insurance? And there is insurance housekeeping in the bill. We'll look at it. It will give me one very long presentation unless somebody would like to do the second half. I will get all of the really boring bills out of the way at one time. So I'm gonna schedule testimony and then we can make a decision with, you know, I think it's just housekeeping and we'll get it done. But today, the last time we started going through, people got a little cross-eyed, asked that we, try and get it into outline form. And Christine, you're here, come on up.
Everything's around last time.
Is it on, if it's on our iPad?
I mean, yeah, the
Yeah.
bill's public on.
Yeah, we should.
What's the number? I don't see it on the.
Page 659.
659.
Oh, I didn't.
It's the only H bill we've got. Oh. It's early in the season, we don't need to. Full construction.
What's the one again?
659.
Page 66. Pages.
H. Okay.
I apologize if I was cross-eyed the last time we went through this drawing.
You were alone.
They're excited about it.
Oh, goodness, that is.
So anyway, we had a hard time. So. Yes, and I will take the copy, then I can take it over, which will make it easier. Okay, we can start and
Great.
welcome. We haven't seen you, I don't think, here.
No, so I am, for the record, my name is Christine Brown and I am the director of the Captive Insurance Division. So, for the Department of Financial Regulation, and in my role, I directly support Deputy Commissioner Sandy Bagel-Stone, who was the one who was here. Yes, so, Sandy regretfully is in flight on her way home from a business trip, so I'm filling in for her.
Well, that's fine, because this is captive. We'll have Sandy in when we get to everything else.
Yeah, okay, yeah, so Sandy's the deputy commissioner of the captive insurance division.
Okay.
So,
You
and
want-
she reports to our commissioner,
Okay.
Kevin Gaffney, yes, so.
Okay.
But I've worked closely with her on this bill and support her, so, I'll be presenting today. I just wanted to say thank you, Madam Chair and committee members for allowing me the time to present the bill. As you are probably aware, this is an annual thing that the Captive Insurance Division does, and we really appreciate your time in reviewing the bill with us. The bill this year is a housekeeping bill, so primarily technical corrections and clarifications. Although it doesn't have any major changes or major impacts that we see, it's still a really important aspect of how we regulate captives, just to make sure that our law is up to date, consistent, clear for the entities that we regulate and for us as
But you have
regulators.
it correctly. Sorry, just making sure that the term in one section of the law means the same thing as the term in another section that got drafted 15 years ago.
That's absolutely right. Yes, yeah, we, this year, as you'll see when I walk through, we even found some references, dating back many years, like, decades ago that we, didn't correct at the time. So, this is something that we do annually and miraculously always find things.
And this is probably more housekeeping than some bills. Some bills we created new captives or new cells within captives or new relationships in captives. But this year is pretty much housekeeping.
That's correct, yes, thank you. So I will get into, the components of the bill now, if everyone's good with that. The first section of the bill updates, relevant references involving, sponsored captive insurance companies. So, I don't know if you want me to give kind of a broad definition or analogy for
I
sponsored
think that might be
captives.
good,
Okay,
because some of the committee members are new and haven't been doing this for years.
yes, okay, so, there is a little bit of a nuance with this type of captive insurance company, but what we like to do is, an analogy we like to use is comparing it to, a condominium structure or an
The
apartment.
image, my image is an apartment.
Exactly, yes, so the sponsored captive, which is the licensed insurance company, is the building. Within that building or the sponsored captive, we have what we call protected cells. And you could think of those as units within the apartment building or the condo that are rented or owned by other entities. So they're essentially renting the license of the sponsored captive to conduct insurance business. The cells are segregated from one another, so the assets and liabilities and all of the risks are segregated by statute between the cells. So there's no commingling of risk within the cells. And the structure has been used in a lot of very different ways. Initially, we thought it was going to facilitate kind of a speed to market type of product, where if a company was faced with, say, a really challenging renewal where they weren't getting coverages or there were gaps in coverage that they were finding, they could set up this cell in a sponsored captive to fill a particular need within their entire insurance program. So that's really generally what a sponsored captive insurance company is. If anyone has questions, I can try to answer, or we can move on to the change. So, oh, sure, yeah.
Just a general question in terms of how something like this is used. If you have a small company that wants to, in fact, rent a room.
Mhm.
How's the pricing done? Is the pricing done by the sponsored unit as opposed to something discrete for the buyer of that particular unit?
The pricing is done for the buyer of that unit, so they use, each cell has its own actuarial study that helps basically estimate funding, project losses for the particular business plan within the cell. So what the sponsor does is more administrative duties, coordinate with auditors, coordinate with actuaries, do some of the management and operational activities, but is not, the underwriting is done per se by those specific entities themselves pertaining to the risks within the cell.
If something goes wrong and someone who is renting a room
Mhm.
has a problem and a major loss and the inability to cover that loss, who's responsible, if anybody?
The renter or the owner of the cell is responsible, so.
Do they have to tell you details before they, in effect,
Right.
become self-insured to rent that space? So that you're satisfied that the financials and the actuarial estimates are appropriate?
Yes, that is required in statute by statute, and we also, on our website, we have a specific application form for these types of captives, which is almost identical to any other type of captive. The amount of information that we require, which includes an actuarial feasibility study, information about the owner, the business plan.
So you have approval of, you can occupy that apartment.
Exactly,
Because you
yes,
need to keep the whole thing.
safe, yes, solvent and compliant with our laws. So it's been a growing sector in the captive insurance space, a growing type of insurance company. And we are constantly looking at our rules and our processes to make sure that we are monitoring them closely, because they are all different, just like every captive insurance company is different. The needs and usage is different, but we have authority to approve before they get into the facility. And then every time they make a change to their plan, want to add new lines of coverage, changes in directors and officers if they're an incorporated cell, all of that has to get prior approval by us. Sure,
Okay,
okay.
section 1 is definitions.
Yeah, so exactly. So basically what this does is, last year, or in 2022, actually, the legislative session, we amended the definition of a sponsored captive insurance company to, what we were trying to do, our attempt was to align the definition with what we allow in all other types of captives. We allow captive insurance companies to insure unaffiliated business, but it has to be controlled unaffiliated. And we have a definition of controlled unaffiliated in our statute. Really what it means is that if there was an entity that owned a captive insurance company and they had an affiliate or a contractual agreement with another entity whereby they can control the risk management of that entity, we would review that and then if we're in agreement, we would allow them to insure those risks of that particular company, understanding that it wasn't going to increase the risk profile of the parent company because the risk management strategy is all under the same umbrella. So that's what a controlled unaffiliated entity looks like to us. Back in 2022, when we revised the statute, we added that a participant, which again is the renter of the license, the participant in the cell could insure unaffiliated risks. What we failed to say there was controlled unaffiliated. So our intent was to mirror what we allow for other types of captives. But stakeholders interpreted it that we were going to all of a sudden start to allow these cell programs to insure unaffiliated risk, which we would consider commercial insurance. The premise of a captive insurance company is self-insurance, insuring your own risk. So we didn't allow people to just insure, or companies to insure unaffiliated risk. And we explained, no, our intent was this, look at this definition. What this change does is explicitly clarify what our intent was all along, which is to, define controlled unaffiliated risks within this section of the statute and point to the definition that is included in our general definitions in section 6001. So it's really just bringing the statute in line to how we're regulating and how we regulate all other types of captives. Okay, any questions?
No, I don't see any.
Okay,
So this clarifies how we regulate unaffiliated.
exactly. To make sure that there's control in that relationship, that it isn't just an unaffiliated entity with no relationship to the captive or the participant or cell owner. So if we're okay with section 1, I can move on to section 2, which also relates to sponsored captive insurance companies. And
What did we strike out under protected? Being pre-protected and sell.
oh, yes, so in the section 2.
Yep.
That was just a typo. It said gift and it was meant to say sell. So that was that.
Okay.
Yeah. So what we're doing here is, we again are aligning our practices with how we regulate other types of captives in that.
And this is all in sponsored, so we're aligning our practices of how we regulate other captives with how we are regulating sponsored captives.
That's
And they are one of our,
they have been around for a little while, but as I mentioned earlier, they've become more popular. The use, we're seeing a growth in this area and this type of captive. So we're just trying to make sure that the statutes align with how we intend to regulate these entities and align with how we regulate other types of captives.
This question.
Yeah.
Then is naming conventions. Does each one of these cells have a name, and
Yes.
could the name be McCormick Insurance Company, for example? Or does it have to be something that indicates that it is a cell?
A cell. We have a naming convention for a type of cell, an incorporated cell. It has to have IC after the name or in the name, or an incorporated cell in the name. So there is a naming convention for certain types of cells. There
Does it
are,
have to be a corporate entity?
it doesn't. So there's another type of cell that is not a corporate entity that transacts business basically through contractual agreements. And they are not an incorporated entity with the Secretary of State. Those don't have a required naming convention. Sometimes it's as simple as protected cell. I'm gonna way simplify this, but sometimes it would be like corporate protected cell 3. Or, you know, and so the naming convention doesn't have to say anything in particular unless it's an incorporated cell, in which case it does have to say either incorporated cell or IC in the name. We do track them individually. We have a database and we have a list of all of the protected cells, who their owners are, what their business plans are. We get financial statements for every single protected cell. So we regulate them identically to how we regulate another type of captive. We're looking at financials on an annual basis. They have an audit requirement, an actuarial requirement. So again, it's just a special type of structure that allows entities to either enter the market more quickly, or in some cases, there are companies that just want to segregate risks. So this is a better model to do that.
It's out of curiosity, are actuaries licensed in Vermont?
Yes,
They are.
they are, yeah. We have a list of actuaries, so the actuaries that we use don't have to be, they can be a member of the Academy of Actuaries. It's a national organization. So we have very specific qualifications for the actuaries that we allow to opine on the opinions that we get, yeah. So there's a national standard and, they have continuing education requirements and all of those things.
I actually remember years ago in the auditor's office, we referred to actuaries, auditors whose sense of humor has been surgically removed.
Yeah, I come from an accounting background and I do recall that they were the one other.
Well, the general public has that view of all accountants.
Yes, exactly, yeah. So it's good if we can, pick on somebody.
So this whole section is just clarifying how you regulate sponsored, which brings it into line with how you regulate all other captives.
That's right. This particular section here, what we're doing is, backing up, we allow any type of captive insurance company to convert to any other type. So if you were a single parent captive and you wanted to form an association captive because some of your other associates, you are in an association and you want to be a member of an association captive, we allow that conversion through statute. And essentially what that does is allow a continuation of the business. Basically picking it up and putting it into another corporate structure without any break in operations or services. What we're trying to do here is allow any type of captive to convert to an unincorporated cell. The law didn't allow this or didn't have explicit language.
Where is that? I'm on page 3.
Sure, so that is on. Yes, it starts on page 3, yes,
Okay.
or page 2, sorry, is where it starts, conversion into a protected cell.
Okay.
That's line 16 is where this starts, and this language is basically copied from other sections of our law that allows conversions from one type of captive insurance company to another. So our law lacked explicit language to authorize this conversion. And by clarifying in statute, it will allow the conversion to happen in a consistent regulatory manner and allow the same protections that would otherwise be allowed in any other type of conversion, where the operations of the captive won't be disrupted by the conversion.
Okay. So this just spells out how one kind of captive can convert to another.
Can convert into a protected cell.
Into a protected
Yes.
cell.
Yes.
Okay, I'm gonna need an outline here. Okay. Okay, and that gets us where on page 3?
So we are going all the way down, so that page 3, the entire thing is related to the conversion process for a captive insurance company to convert into an unincorporated protected cell. This whole section is basically talking about that.
Okay.
And I'm happy to read through if that would be helpful.
No.
Okay.
That's what we did last time.
Okay. So yes, this is really, again, we do this with all other types of captives. We've even done it with captives going into a cell, but it's a clunky process right now because there's no statutory guidance.
Okay, so this is guidance on how you convert yourself into one of those rooms in the apartment building?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yes, that's right.
Okay, that gets us to 3.
Yeah. Any questions?
I'll see you.
Okay. So we are now on section 3, and this is an amendment to our general provisions for captive insurance companies regarding parametric contracts. I don't know if you're familiar with parametric contracts. It's a type of insurance product that,
Is this the one that says you're insured if there's a tornado within 150 miles and whether or not you're damaged if there's a tornado?
that's correct, yes.
I
Yeah,
do
you
remember
got
that
it.
being
Yeah.
explained last year.
That's great, yes, thank you.
Like
And-
betting on the horses.
It is, and in some cases, but this is what we'll talk about today, so. Back in 2022, we amended the statute to explicitly allow parametric contracts to be used in captive insurance.
Okay.
Leading up to those amendments, parametric contracts were not widely used in captives. And they were primarily qualified under a federal law that said that they were more like a derivative or a swap, like a bet,
Yeah.
kind of. And so it was a balance sheet transaction. Since then, there's been innovation with the product and different data analytics that now allow us and allow the industry at large, commercial insurance companies, to consider these types of contracts insurance, not just a swap. And part of that is having proof of loss. So even though you're in a radius of where a tornado happened and it's all been verified, now a lot of times what we're seeing is contracts will still require proof of loss, which is maybe a picture of the damage. So it's not traditional loss adjusting that can take months or years.
Okay, but it now allows some loss adjusting. It's not just if it happens, you get paid. It's if it happens. And these are some contracts. They
Yes,
say if it
exactly.
happens, you have to show us a picture of.
Yeah, you still have to prove that you had damage, but we are still gonna pay $100,000, say, for an example, regardless of the amount of damage that you have. So there's no traditional loss adjusting. But you do have to prove that you sustained a loss in many of these contracts. So now we're getting into more or less accounting treatment, right? So either it's a swap or a derivative, or you can call it an insurance product. What we did in 2022 was we attempted to define what a parametric contract was, and in that definition, we said that a parametric contract is not an insurance contract. And that turns out that that is a little bit too restrictive because there are cases when it can be an insurance contract. So what we'd like to do is strike that language and just leave in the fact that they must comply with applicable state and federal law and regulations. And we feel that that protects us such that if we see one of these contracts, we can review it and we'll know whether, and the auditors and accountants will know which way we need to go with the accounting treatment.
Okay, so if it's insurance, you can treat it like insurance, and if it's just, if it happens, we pay, you treat it like not insurance.
Right, like a derivative. Yeah, yeah. So it's really modernizing, I think. It doesn't do a whole lot. It doesn't change a whole lot, except that it removes that language that says that it's not insurance, because
It may.
oftentimes with, it is insurance, from what we're seeing in captives. It isn't used a lot, but it's still a fairly new product for captive insurers, but it's also important today with climate change and those kinds of risks. It's becoming an important
We should
component.
do a flood captive for Vermont.
People have talked about it.
Sure. Okay. Then we'll
So
move on to
that's that
section
one.
4.
Yes, so section 4 updates the minimum capital requirements for another type of captive called an agency captive. And what we're proposing to do here is reduce the requirement, the minimum statutory required capital from 500,000 to 250,000. And back when we initially passed the agency captive statutes and created this type of captive was in 2017. Since then, we have gained significant understanding of these types of captives, the risks that are going into them. And what we're trying to do here really is be more consistent with a pure type captive insurance company. So if you look on page 5, line 1, you'll see that 250,000 is the minimum statutory requirement for a pure captive insurance company. An agency captive is owned by an agency or an insurance agency or brokerage firm. In that structure aligns with a pure type captive that is owned by an entity as a single parent. So another reason why we're proposing this change is you'll see, I think it's in here, but if not, our in this section that talks about our minimum statutory capital. The commissioner is authorized to prescribe additional capital and surplus based upon the type, the volume, the nature of the insurance business transacted. So again, when we get an application for a new license for a new captive insurance company, we review that application in detail. We review the funding proposed based on actuarial estimates. And we often don't see companies coming in saying we want to capitalize at the minimum. The minimum is the floor before we would consider a company insolvent. So oftentimes we require capital that is in excess of our minimum. Our minimum is basically before we want to take action on a company. So it really doesn't, in practice, the minimum doesn't impact the way that we regulate as far as what we would require for capital. We look at each unique business plan, the risks going into the captive, and require capital.
Basically, your experience says that you don't need to require 500,000, that this is closer to a pure captive. And it is therefore treated like a pure captive.
Yeah, for the minimum statutory requirements, yes, that's right, and
And
then.
you can always set higher.
Exactly, and often most of the time it's higher.
Okay. We're under regulatory supervision fund.
Yes, fun one. So section 5. This section also is a correction that we missed. Last year during the 2023 legislative session, we amended the bill to increase our share of the premium taxes that we collect from
Yeah, I remember.
from 11% to 13%.
Okay,
And that was enacted last year.
yes.
So that went into effect. What we failed to realize was that in doing so, we did not realize that that percentage was also referenced in section 6017. So we updated 6014, which is our premium tax section, but we didn't update 6017, which is the regulatory and supervision fund, to mirror that increase. So
Okay, so the rather than 1113 will be going into that.
exactly, and it's really just, if there's no financial fiscal impact because it's happened last year.
That fund is used to do what?
That fund is used to fund the operations of the captive division. So we have a staff of 30, approximately 30 individuals.
Remember we had 3.
I know, it's amazing, but we've been growing, very, we've been
We are
growing.
the largest in the world.
We are
And
now,
we have
yes.
30 people. It's not bad.
Yeah, so it funds our operations.
Okay.
Yes,
Okay, so the premium tax, you get the people on, or the,
And that happened last year, and all we're doing here is correcting section 6017, which still refers to the 11%, and it should be 13, because that's what was enacted last year. So that's the first part.
Okay,
The second part of our proposed amendments here is with respect to, it's on page 6, line 7. While we were in this section, we realized that we had a very outdated reference to fees collected from reinsurers that are allowed to reinsure captive insurance companies in Vermont. Back in 2010, so many, many years ago, we got rid of those fees. We sent notice to industry about, it was basically a fee restructuring. We got rid of the reinsurance fees, but we increased our licensing fees to more than offset that elimination of fees. So we haven't been collecting reinsurance fees since 2010. However, the law, because we didn't realize that, at the time, we didn't make the correction. The law still refers to fees collected from reinsurers. So in practice, we haven't been doing this for a very long time. There's no fiscal impact.
this is a cleanup.
It's a cleanup because and Sandy Bigglestone did do a memo to show basically how the increase in licensing fees
Right.
more than offset the removal of the fee for the reinsurers. So I can provide that if you don't already
That
have
would
it.
be fun.
Sure. Of course.
Okay. So on to 6.
Yeah, so great. So 6 is another correction that we realized when we were looking at the laws for reinsurance. This language was implemented decades ago, and as you'll see on page 7, we're striking out language that basically says if a captive insurance company were to use a reinsurance company that was offshore, they wouldn't need prior approval from the commissioner to do so. And that is not how we operate in practice. In practice, we approve every single transaction, every business plan. We want to know who our captives are doing business with. We think that this was worded this way because we do have some captive insurance companies whose owners also own captive insurance companies in other jurisdictions offshore. So we presume that that's why this was worded this way, to allow that without needing our prior approval. In practice, we approve everything. We want to be able to approve everything. So we want to strike that language to make it consistent with how we practice, and it's frankly more conservative because of we would have to approve before they're allowed to use a reinsurer offshore, which is what we do now in practice.
Okay.
And just another point to that, since this language, we've updated our regulation on reinsurance to comply with the NAIC model laws around reinsurance, which really promotes transparency. And so a lot has been updated since this language was first drafted and enacted a long time ago.
Okay, that gets us on to section 7.
Okay, so
I can at least get halfway through.
I hope that we're gonna get through all this part pretty quickly, because sections 7 through 18 all relate to confidentiality statutes within Title 8, the captive insurance section of Title 8. So throughout our captive insurance statutes, we refer to our confidentiality standards, and we have statutes that protect the information that we collect. Depending on the type of captive, it's scattered throughout the statute. What we're trying to do here, and Sandy Bagelston worked very closely with our legal counsel at DFR. We're trying to have consistency throughout the entire statute for captives, such that the language is similar, consistent, and we're not having to read, for example, we have some language for risk retention groups, which is a type of captive. That was different than the language that we had for pure type captive, that was different from other types of captives. Slightly different. We still treated everything the same, but the language didn't sync up exactly. We want to make sure that the language is consistent for all captives. And so this was really trying to streamline the confidentiality standards to make sure that they're consistent with each other and that we're consistent with the insurance department, because we also we're updating reference in section 22, which is the traditional insurance confidentiality and information sharing statute, which is basically what we're doing there. If you want to, we can look at that section really quick. That's on section or page. Sorry, I'm just making sure that page 7.
That's where we are.
Line 13. We are striking out only to the extent contemplated in 15 USC 6716. So basically what that does is saying this section also applies to captives. We want this section to apply to captives.
Okay, you took that out,
Yeah,
so you provisions chapters 141, 142, this title only to the extent exempted, so we're not going to exempt,
that's right.
and they're all,
Going to be part of this. They're all going to fall under section
Same
22.
confidentiality.
Yes. And then what we're doing section by section here is we're proposing amendments to each section that reference back to our general licensing section that talks about confidentiality of information that we receive when we get an application for a captive. We have a section for examinations that talks about confidentiality of information that we collect when we're doing our examinations every 5 years or sooner. And then we also have the risk retention group section that talks about confidentiality. So we're pointing to those main sections everywhere else in our law, rather than having individual sections that have language about confidentiality. We're trying
so
to
they
point.
will all have the same confidentiality rules.
Yes,
Each
that's right.
section will have the same rules.
That's right, yes.
Okay.
The risk retention groups, you'll see if we flip to, see where we start with risk retention groups. Risk retention groups are a little bit different in that they do have to file with the NAIC. They're a different type of captive that files regulatory filings with the NAIC. So some of their information is public, unlike other types of captives. So that's the only difference when we get to risk retention groups. There are some filings that are public because they file with the NAIC because they operate in all states. They are licensed in Vermont, but they're allowed to operate in all states. So the regulatory regime for risk retention groups is a little bit different.
Questions? So we've got here and Bill off the end, I think we've got a page or two at the end that is all bringing all the different sections in line, so they all have the same privacy rulings.
That's right.
Okay,
Yes, yeah, and
Executives
again,
retention, which is registered with NAIC. They are national, even though some of them are licensed in Vermont, and some of their records are public.
that's right. They're licensed in Vermont, but they can operate through a registration process in other states. So there's a little, there is transparency. Other states can go onto the NEIC site and look at their filings. So that's why they're a little bit different. So that's really what all of those sections are doing. It's a lot of, language that is struck, and then added. But it's again, just to make everything consistent and pointing to, the definition section, or the licensing section, exam section, and the risk the main sections of our law that speak to confidentiality.
And section 18 is examination authority. That's the same thing. So
The same thing.
we got through this faster. That is doing great. Okay, any questions? Okay. Committee, Maria, you're gonna talk about the clean bar bill? Or,
Not in any detail, but I
okay,
can tell you generally. what's
okay,
in
so
it
you're
if
still
you want.
drafting it,
Well, it's just finished,
just finished.
so it's ready to
Okay.
go.
Have you got time if we take a 10-minute break? Or are you in a really tight schedule?
To go through the whole thing. It's 150 pages long.
A brief outline. What's that? A brief outline?
I can tell you briefly what is in it, yeah, and then the department.
So can we
comment-
take-
Yes, we can do it now, we can do it after a 10-minute break,
You ready to take a break?
whatever you'd like to do.
I think we
should band it off, let's do this.
Okay.
But I don't know what
Because I was gonna soldier on.
It's coming in on Friday.
Thank you.
Yes, we have DFR and the department heads coming in to go through each one of the change in the housekeeping bill, so we know what they are. It sounds like captive insurance is a little similar than we thought it might be.
It is. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So, yeah, we can knock out one, 2/3 of the bill, because it's just doing the same thing in every department. Not too bad, but we will discuss that. You drafted the, captive, right? Any red flags in there for you? Sounds pretty benign, okay? So briefly, what's in the,
So Maria Royal with Legislative Council, so the general DFR omnibus bill covering insurance, banking, security. Just finished, as I mentioned,
which is why it hasn't got a bill number and it's.
Right,
It,
the concept was introduced as a short form. And then it's in the House. And the intent was to draft an amendment, which actually includes all of this, so.
and they are gonna get to it, right? Congress asked if we would take it. up.
Right, so that's my understanding is you're thinking about possibly amending the captives bill and adding all of the other
That
DFR
seems to be the
provisions.
only way, if they can't do it in the House, where it usually starts. But that's the only way to get it done. And we can listen to what it is and then decide if it's worth playing the rules.
So just very broadly, this is one of those things I've had spent so much time doing technical formatting Word that I don't get to sit back and actually look at substantively what it does. So if you asked me to go through it, it wouldn't go well.
Okay.
But just so you know what's in here, there are some housekeeping technical stuff. Then there is updating the insurance holding company law in statute. NAIC, as you know, often has model laws and for accreditation purposes,
You have to be, you have to be in line or you don't get a credit.
That's right, so a big chunk of this is just updating the existing laws based on NAIC. There's a new proposal for pet insurance that regulates
This
pet
getting
insurance.
to be a really big business.
So a new chapter,
We did travel insurance, I think last year, it's time to Yeah, more than pet insurance.
And then the bulk of it concerns a similar kind of, there's the CSBS, the Conference of State Bank Supervisors, so banking. They also have a model law
Okay.
related to money transmission services. So, it's chapter in Title 8, Chapter 79 concerns all of the money services provisions, and there are all these different subchapters. So it's basically updating all of those subchapters to conform with the model. So that's the bulk of what's in here.
Okay, it is happening.
So
Well, tomorrow we have DFR coming in to go into detail about what we're doing and why we should do it, what they're asking us to do. Any questions so far? Anybody who got DFR, anybody want to hear from on active insurance? Can you? I hate to ask anybody to do anything. Can somebody do me an outline, just?
Oh, yeah.
Well, I got notes, but it'd be good if I can compare my notes to your notes.
no problem. I have that. I did for the house floor report,
Okay,
so
that's
it's already done. I'll give you.
Okay. Nobody ever volunteers to do this. If anyone would
No
like.
one
to-
has volunteered in a decade.
No, no one has ever volunteered to do this job.
And I'm sure DFR also has their own summaries, so to the extent you want to supplement anything, yep,
It's just going through,
no,
18 chapters. Say, we're all doing the same. Yeah, it's good to have consistent policy.
I do feel like someone's gonna ask us something about pet insurance.
Well, that's coming next. So they will be in here tomorrow to explain pet insurance.
Sorry.
We did.
Dogs loose on.
Yeah, I'd like to hear from a fluffy dog about that.
I've been trying to get a fluffy dog, as a therapy dog, in this building for years, and I keep failing. I think we should have a therapy dog, they can just wander in.
Especially for this bill.
Yes. There are at least 4 bills floating around here, I need a therapy dog for, and I'm sure.
If a dog that bites anybody who asks for new revenue.
There. They would like that dog in appropriations. Okay,
So can I just follow up? I have not had a chance to listen to the testimony yesterday. I think you heard from the treasurer's office on the state investments, the whole certificates of deposit in the credit unions, right? You already voted that,
that
but
would
then
always
you're,
get voted out, there's
are
nothing.
you okay with
Yeah,
the existing language?
yes,
Okay.
the treasurer was fine with it. They had some one word and it said it wouldn't make any difference if we changed the word or not, so we didn't.
Fine, okay,
And, that one's gone.
great,
We got second reading,
Okay.
third reading tomorrow.
great, okay, hadn't even
yeah.
checked,
So
so,
we did have another one for school
okay,
construction and pooling community bonds and putting it through the bond bank. Apparently there is a resolution because the education committees want JFO to do modeling for how you pay for this. Technically, JFO works for the money committee.
Yeah.
So the money committees are going to ask for some modeling on. It seems that they think we're gonna need some actual money along with some bonds, so.
okay,
That's being worked on in the House. We had our first report yesterday. And, the treasurer did the modeling for bonds. But I don't think we're gonna need some more money. There's only what, 383 million the first year in absolute urgent health and safety repairs. So, it's a large amount of money. Okay, committee, that is it. Tomorrow we have another scintillating day. We had a bunch of witnesses we couldn't make it. Yeah. Who would anybody like to hear from on this Medicare? I've got Medicare supplements. I've got the state employees down to ask because we're telling them they can never vote to have a Medicare supplement. And I don't know if they like that any better. they were telling them they had to go into a supplement plan. But we'll hear from them. And then we've got Brattleboro Hospital coming up tomorrow. Zane's trying to get a hold of somebody from UVM because I know last year, and I think it's happened before, they were refusing to accept universal health care's Medicare supplements. There were issues about payments and the difficulty of getting payments.
They don't want us to survive.
They don't want.
They don't own the Medicare Advantage.
Who owns the
MV,
MVE?
who I've reached out to, who also doesn't want to testify, they want to submit written comment.
Fine, let them submit written comments then. Do we have subpoena power? I mean, that's interesting, but no, UVM. Last year, I think, maybe a year before, there was a big brouhaha because they were not gonna take universal health care insurance because of issues with timely payments and the time spent trying to get money out of them. And that wasn't their supplement plan. Cause I know they have one that's new, Blue Cross has one that's new. But
Sue just asked if we knew anybody that wants to talk in S-230. A lobbyist caught me in the hall and they said, if we're gonna talk about this more, I just forwarded you the note. She sent me an email with a request to speak on this. Heather Schuldeis, so,
oh, Heather, okay,
and then I'd love to hear from, I don't know, but she said she has a client.
okay.
Forwarded an email, and I'd love to hear from Blue Cross Blue Shield. They were in the room, but they didn't.
They were, well, because I hadn't scheduled Sarah. They are the major, I think you got the gist. They've been going at it for years with, we want to do more, but it'll cost the plans more if you spend more. But it seems like, yeah, it depends on how many people wait until they're getting chest pains and decide they don't like the heart doctor they've got on Medicaid and the supplements and Part C. And they go, then they come back in. And if enough of them did that, then you get out, if you're working, you're not hanging in. You're paying your insurance and then you get.
Concern is, no matter how many disclosures you give, you're still gonna get people who look at the bottom line and who listen to Joe Namath, and they're gonna go buy it, and they're only gonna discover there's a problem when there's a problem.
Yeah,
And I'm not sure that there's a whole lot that we can do to prevent that. I'm open to it, but I haven't.
there, yeah, if you're looking at, my dentist just told me I need a complete set of dentures for X thousands of dollars. And my eyesight's going bad and I can't hear. I'm gonna look for the place that's gonna cover it. And, oh, you know, and I'm not thinking about heart insurance when I'm 67 years old. I'm healthy. So, and yeah, that's the hard part. And Medicare is a federal rule. I wonder if you're not protected for the supplement is a federal rule. We'll talk to Sarah, because if it is, then we can't do much about it. They say, right now, you get in that 6-month window. And you stay there, you get a pretty good rate, you cover it under community rating, so they can't nail me because I'm over 65. So from age, but if you come back in and you've got a heart condition, I never had any physical for my Medicare supplement. You come back in and you've got a heart condition and you've got this and that, that's gonna make it very expensive.
But I mean, that's logical too.
Yeah.
I mean, if I were an insurance company, something I would certainly do, and I think anybody responsible
Yeah, you
would
can't,
do that.
you can't know you've got bad wiring, your house is likely to burn down. You get insurance one day, if the house goes up the next.
The whole idea of insurance is, the person who doesn't have a problem, has a problem, starts on day one, starting at the same point. If you wait till somebody has a problem, that's the only reason they're gonna change that plan. So,
And that's why it's protecting.
but the key is whether or not the person, when they went into that cheaper plan in the first place, knew the risk that they were potentially exposing themselves to down the line. And frankly, whether that they consciously ignored her.
That's what we need somebody like the governor to be on a, public service ad during. They can get on the Hallmark channel, if you look at that thing.
They listened to Joe Namath for.
I know, put it on the Hallmark.
Nobody's gonna listen to me if you're talking about insurance.
Oh, then, just a
Yeah,
little bit.
That's where you get up to go and get
Yeah.
a snack.
No, but that, I mean, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. I mean, we for so many years put so much information on ballots, hoping that it would discourage people from voting for their school budgets, or at least know, I can't see that it's had any effect. We
No,
keep,
Three Stooges put it, you can lead a horse to water, but a pencil has to be lead.
But what?
Pencil.
A pencil has to be lead.
okay, you're getting it,
Really punchy this week. It's really,
So, but that's what we get for 2 hours of captive insurance. I think that bill, we've got a bunch of bills, I don't know where to go with. We have the 248 bill. I've had as many sides of that issue. I'm a little nervous if we take out aesthetics, then the PUC said they don't even consider it. If we take out that one feasible thing that the public has any control over, and we just let it be where the business wants to put things, I'm afraid we could end up with several more on Route 7, because that's where the three-phase power is, and that's where it's cheapest to put it. So I'm trying to figure out, I also understand the frustration of having somebody come in and just, just
Create
drag,
monstrosity,
yeah, just be
you know,
obstructive.
and
Yeah.
that affects your home and your price, your value, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
And it is a real issue.
And I haven't, it always seems to be rich white homeowners that are arguing. But we're more likely to put these in poor communities. I mean, there's just different images that come up.
That idea that the aesthetics criteria matters only to the rich, I think is very insulting to the rest of us. I'm not a barbarian, aesthetics matter a lot to me. And I think to most people, including poor people,
No.
you know.
No, Chair,
Yes.
the PUC doesn't consider aesthetics, but town plans may. And if in your town plan, you say where stuff must go and may not go, shall go or shall not go,
Yes,
then
that's,
the PUC respects that.
that's what we've heard. We also heard from Brooke Dingledine that when she was doing in Warren and had to tell them, they had to say shall. Warren is not an unsophisticated or poor town. You get up into the kingdom where everybody, there's no full-time manager, there's nobody to guide you. We've also said town plans have to have areas that they designate for utilities.
They cannot, the town plan may not say, no, none of these things. It says, these things shall go here, those
Okay.
things shall go there.
So if,
And then the PUC honors
what's
it.
that? So could we say that if you located the town designated plan, aesthetics doesn't count?
Aesthetics.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to find a way where we do some form of aesthetics. If the town has a reasonable site and the town in their plan has voted for this, that might be a way to relieve some of the problem and still have some control over the
So I
site.
guess the one question is, what problem are we trying to solve? Because when we listened to the testimony, there was one site that, as far as the PUC, that had been affected by the aesthetic criteria in the first place.
I think we heard the other day, it's that they slow down the project, that they might have to hire an aesthetics issue. It's time is money. It's-
But again, you know, they started out by saying, well, this expert like $150,000 or $200,000, and then it got down to, wait a minute, let's talk about, what are we talking about? about an aesthetic expert, $10,000 to $20,000. That's far different than the 150 they started with in the testimony.
Which
This
testimony?
was by VPERG.
Okay, right. I really appreciated the developer who came in. I think we only heard from one developer. And,
We didn't even line up developers, he showed up.
right, thank you.
And I got a note asked him.
I can sympathize with the chilling effect of regulations and people having instruments at their disposal to stop a project that add cost and time and make someone scared from a site. I really found his compromise language compelling. Brownfields, certain areas that are that clearly had other uses. And similarly, in the Act 250 process for housing, we're talking about commercial conversion and things where you're not materially changing a historic use of the land. Which, it's like one thing if you've families lived there for 100 years and you've gotten used to exactly the way it's always looked. It's another if, you moved in and you didn't realize it used to be a dump or, and now they want to put solar panels on top of it because it could never be used for anything else. And I still would like to say, some of us grew up really excited to see a big field of windmills or a big field of solar panels instead of refineries. And instead of, when we say you don't want to look like New Jersey, we're talking about big smokestacks and we're talking about a lot of the heavy industry that's fossil fuel based that lines the roads. It just might be generational, but I grew up thinking this was, something exciting to see and something that was a lot nicer to look at than things most other people in the country have to look at that are really not only ugly or barbaric or whatever, but also pollute and cause congestion and respiratory
But that
illness.
doesn't mean that you can't pay attention to aesthetics.
Senator Bray, am I correct?
It doesn't mean they're automatically barbarically ugly either.
I'm good with it barbarically ugly. I think you can do brownfields now, is that correct?
Yeah, we did go a long time ago that said that brownfield, dump,
Yeah.
Yeah.
gravel pit,
Okay.
parking lots, rooftop. The thing I don't know is, when we did 174 with the siding bill, where Senator McDonald was saying, if you have a designated area
Yeah.
in your town, certified in the energy element of your town fund. What, other than the fact that once a town does that, they get substantial deference rather than due consideration at the PUC, never tested yet.
Right.
Did it ever have the effect of attracting solar and probably solar to those regions in town? And did it help? I honestly don't know the answer. Everyone thought it could work. That was a way to sort of try to give us a fresh start. Where like towns just can't say no, they need to say yes in our own way.
But it has to be a reasonable site, you
Right.
can't do it down the bottom of the hill.
Right, and I don't know if that turned out to be brief. I know a lot of towns went through town planning and added that and,
Well, maybe it would, who would use that, A&R?
well, the RPCs have been like the mentors on helping towns get that designation, so some RPCs might know
No.
their county well enough to know a town that's done it and actually deployed it and used it and seen it work or not. So that.
I can send him a comment.
Thanks. Yeah, just a clarification. I threw the word barbaric and barbarian into the conversation. I do not mean to say that solar collectors are barbaric.
No.
After years of that, what I'm saying is the proposition that aesthetic concerns are trivial is barbaric. And that aesthetics do matter, in particular in Vermont, because we sell the beauty, it's our main product. But also just in terms of the quality of life for all of us. And my position has never been that we should have solar collectors because they're ugly. My position is that we should be careful about where we put them. I think people who raise aesthetic issues about a proposal are doing a service to the community as well as to themselves.
Well, to them,
As well as to
But, I mean, yes, people will, it was Garcia that said with our joint meeting, we were all at the joint meeting. That's what it should be, that people do not change easily.
Yeah.
And, that. And so, you know, there are some people that just don't want any change. And there are other people that, and you can use that aesthetic to slow things down and be a nuisance. There are other people who are really concerned, and we've heard examples of both. If the towns are designating places for solar fields and we aren't putting them there, then we need to ask why. And if that's not working, I mean, the ultimate solution would be to map it.
Mm-hmm.
And map, I mean, because there's you have to have three-phase power, which isn't everywhere.
Right.
When I was first
Or
here,
you have to pay for it yourself.
yeah, to hook it up. We were paying for farmers to hook up the manure digesters. And we had to get three-phase power out to them so they could net meter. So you've gotta have that, and you've gotta have the transmission lines to get the stuff out of there. Cause we've got a bunch of, we can't get out. And that transmission line up there is going on our bills, we're on the hook for it.
I'm moving power, so the other thing, if we want to stay looking into all this is. It would be helpful to talk to utilities and look at their maps, because they're, like GMP has the most developed map.
Thank you.
And it shows where they can accept more and where you can inject more solar, basically, where you can't. At anything bigger than the residential scale.
But we heard that they said this is a perfect site.
Oh, that one, yeah, that one.
No, I'm not.
But I mean-
We're thinking big picture like this. There's also. And there's data available.
Yeah, you've gotta be able to get the electricity out. And you've got things coming to you about net metering, or that's come up, so I think it's the community where he could sell like 10% of his power to the school. And then the 90% of the power goes to the grid and gets bought at, what still I think is a subsidized price. It's at least more.
Yes. The new.
You, to get on the grid and be approved, you have to bid to put the electricity on at a lower price than the person down the road who's got a higher price.
Okay,
The only place that is guaranteed is our friends up in north of Bradford there, Rygate.
oh, right, no, they couldn't come in.
But they were,
Did they get another date from you? She said they were coming in at 8:15.
they got more than market rates and didn't have to bid
Yeah,
because we
well, they're the only,
were,
but. Yeah, there's more deciding than aesthetics. You've gotta have the power, you've gotta have the transmission ability. The utilities need to be able to use it.
The new RES, I believe, include some changes to the.
Okay.
Well, and I don't know what they just voted it out 911 yesterday. We won't dig into it till after crossover, but
There is something.
there's some controversy over how that metering is and is not allowed. Going forward.
I mean, I know
If you want
there's been a
any
lot
beautiful
of,
details, I'll share them later, but.
okay, there is something in the works, so.
nothing to do with, it's not to do with aesthetics or anything like that.
I'm gonna just sit and change it, because he hasn't had a chance.
Really quick, I just want to latch on to something I heard Senator Bray say earlier as possible, compromise language. Town plans are very well documented, very well enforced, very clear, and also involved with public process. So I'm curious if there is an avenue where you just could intervene on aesthetics, or if the area in question falls within a clearly defined
That,
town plan that allows for solar permits.
that
So
was
I'd be
my
open to.
thought.
Mhm.
Yeah,
It would be in the,
yeah,
The town plan has been a little bit funky, right?
but I think the
It's
town,
something that exists and it's clear.
yeah,
the intervention would be
That was a little-
the formation of the plan.
but the town, because the town designates it as a site for solar, if it's 20 miles from three-phase power, it's probably not gonna be used, and I think that was what we're talking about. We did all this incentive for towns to do it, but I don't know, that's all Alexander Bray knows, if we've actually ever built anything on a town designated space.
I think it's probably unavoidable that something landed there, but is it still a case, I don't.
You'd be surprised.
When Act 250 was first being developed, Dean Davis envisioned as an essential, not just part of it, an essential part of it, that there will be statewide mapping.
It's happened.
And when that didn't happen, a lot of problems developed as a result of that. Governor Cunin led the effort on Act 200, which called for regional planning and
I
coordination
think I was on planning.
plans. Yeah, and again, that was actually not a bad idea. It also split the difference between the power to the states and the power locally. But there was a big backlash on that affected.
Well, we've got towns, and towns do not give up their power, they've historically been the center
Yeah,
of
but
Vermont.
we have just taken several hours of testimony from RPCs.
Right.
And they will, that they're going to be doing that.
In the land use mapping process.
Yeah.
Is,
And
involves the tiers.
Is part of that, including spaces appropriate for solar and.
we have discussed that in more or less this kind of an environment. For instance, we don't have language.
We need
It has been
to
discussed,
provide
it's been floated as an idea, and I think
Because
we should. I mean, I personally think that's a good idea.
I think it would be much easier if there was a map.
Yeah.
So that if it was on the map and it was approved by the town plan, then you. I don't know, you still might want some aesthetics like having a cedar hedge in front of it. If it's across the street from you, just to say it's ugly. But something that's ugly can look like a forest, and then cedar hedges go really fast.
Screening can work sometimes. I think you don't wanna screen the whole state. I mean, that's just, with that will,
No, but if you're putting it in a residential area.
yeah.
If you're putting it on the brownfields, that's one thing, but if you're putting it in a residential area, screening frequently solves the problem.
And another possibility is that we're talking here about large scale fields full of solar panels. There is a, speaking for myself, I've always better that every roof in the state should have some couple of solar panels. Just keep it local, keep it
As long as they're
small.
not in the shade of a mountain.
Well, I live on a wooded northern slope and we've tried and
Yeah,
we can buy into.
2 hours in the afternoon.
Yeah, we were told by the people trying to sell solar collectors that we couldn't do it.
My brother was doing it. He said, move.
What provision killed the solar project on the roof of the car dealership in Manchester? Oh,
I think it was efficiency of mind. I feel like all their roof tiles are solar. Plus, they've got a big solar display down here on the other side. The neighbors in my neighborhood were happy because they want butters, but they look out their bedroom window or their kitchen window, and there was the solar field, and they had no idea it was happening. So,
Yeah, we just put, in Bristol, I don't know, I know, I didn't hear that this was really like going in until I literally heard the sound of them putting in a gravel pit that because of steep banks and trees, all this stuff, I don't think anyone can see unless you're in a helicopter.
And those are
And
places.
it's probably a couple, maybe a megawatt, think of big array, and it just got tucked in a place that was maybe gonna be a gravel pit. People didn't want a gravel pit, all that trucked in and out. Now it's a solar field, our landfill got covered like 2 years ago, so
And those.
it surprises me that, I've been seeing them show up. And I just, but it's not for me to think how hard it is.
What if your housing project is exempt from Act 250?
Cover it. I've never heard anything speak against it.
Okay.
And then you too.
It
adds, it'll add a couple
There
$1,000.
is a twist on that we could talk about.
It'll add more than a couple $1,000. People talking about battery storage and, yeah. But,
Well, can I throw one more thing?
Yes.
We're balancing off things. If you're thinking statewide about how to get more renewable energy, the smaller the deployment, the more the overhead cost is just higher per kilowatt.
Yeah.
So although it's great, it's easy to sort of imagine, every roof would have some on it. You end up a very expensive generating plant spread all over the place.
Especially with our workforce, right?
Right.
what
And
is
then
that to?
what happens when it breaks? Not right
Yeah.
now, but actually it could break right away, like the inverter that goes.
Well, what happens if the roof can't hold the weight? Or you need to re-roof and you've got,
Don't live on the top floor.
Right. They have pretty light though. Some people think it's a lot additional weight. It's like less than. And they can get sheds, and they can sheds down.
The thing in your way of getting where you want to go can be the reason you can't go there. Or it can be the thing you have to go around, or go under, or go over, or go through, or blow up. Or- The thing is, what does anyone ever do that doesn't have some kind of obstacle to doing it? Okay, so
yeah, I mean,
I think those are
Yeah.
problems that definitely
these
come
are
up.
businesses and the quicker they can get permitted and get built and get their product to market, the more money they're making. Because they don't have to pay all those consultants. It's the same argument we make with builders, right? The question is, if towns are supposed to be, how do we get a mapping system that will work for the developers and keep it out of hot point areas, like right across the street from a housing development? In an old gravel pit. If we're still having trouble with things going near houses, why aren't they going in brownfields and down behind cliffs or? And I have a feeling it's the cost.
Not enough brownfields, man.
That is
We
true,
need
that's a
more
good
brown-
thing about Vermont. But, I mean, we'll have the developers, we'll see if we can get them in and talk to us about why can't they, why aren't they going into towns that have a designated area? What's the holdup there?
Brooke England speaks what her ideas are, and Annette Smith said, folks don't show up for hearings,
No, they don't.
and towns don't write plans, and then afterwards, there's a complaint.
You've got towns that have no full-time help except the clerk treasurer. You have any manager or, associate here. So you got 3 people that come in, 5 people maybe. And they sit down and they got 2 hours on Monday night and they do what they can, but the load of work is really heavy. And what do they know about a good place to put development? Because nobody there wants to get in a fight with their next door neighbor because.
It really was supposed to be the RPCs, but.
Yeah, that's what the RPCs are there for those little towns. I don't think any town in Vermont is so small that the select board meetings end at 10 o'clock. I
Oh,
think
no.
those board, they're there till
7,
midnight.
which is better than out of the back of the tractor. Senator Fred.
So if we want witnesses, I would say this, Charlie Baker, Peter Gregory, and Chris Hampton. That way we have that side of the state, that side of the state, and the other corner down there, Brattleboro.
If they're used to saying, and he'll get them. Maybe we can coordinate it when Charlie's sitting here,
Right, I know.
which is what we're trying to.
I mean, I think the bottom line is at least 6 of us are intimately involved in mapping processes this year. It affects transportation on some level too. And if we're gonna go through whatever resources and heartache and emotional energy at all levels of government it will take to do these maps, it would be nice if they function for other things. Many of the recommendations for what is exempt from Act 250, which isn't Act 240, what isn't 248, right? But those include commercial and industrial. It's a small area, but
One small area.
right, it's a very small area, but I'm just saying, you know, we,
But where would solar panels go? They can't all go in one,
shaded areas, right?
or behind tall buildings.
I would think tier 2.
Yeah, not on the mountaintops, but
Right.
can we map that in there? And then how do we map that so it's a place that developers actually feel they can develop? And that's, we can name all the spots we want, but if it doesn't work financially for the developer,
Right,
they're not gonna go there.
well, if we can set forth that towns have to use this criterion
Right.
for the sub-tier.
Right, but we already did something similar, trying to steer development of it. This sort. So that's why I'm thinking about, let's hear from RPC, like we went through mapping
Right,
and designated areas for renewable energy development.
but I think we're looking at all the carrots that we might provide, at least I am in the designated areas. And linking those to good faith efforts to do your mapping. And we have a lot of money going out right now for zoning, bylaws, et cetera. So now would be the time where there are more carrots available to do this work and hopefully more money to RPCs and municipalities to do
Let's
this.
hear from the RPCs and see what kind of take up they're getting on that. Senator McConnell.
Curious what advocates for exempting low-income housing from Act 250.
That's not in this.
No, but the 248 is really is the same discussion. And they would say also making it harder for someone to raise an aesthetic issue on, and under for years I called it Act 248, Section 248. So, but I'm wondering if such exemptions were to be conditioned on the projects in question being fueled by renewable energy. In other words, the exemption goes to a low-income housing that
Okay,
has solar collectors.
we asked Gus Seeley, because I had several emails about that last year, and I think he told me it would cost $10,000 a unit to get it all solar. It was a much higher price than I expected. And I assume if that's your only source of electricity, you're gonna have to have battery storage in the basement. That gets battery storage in every apartment.
Or the
We can
time
have-
with the grid.
Yeah, you'd have to be on the grid.
If you sell your excess, you buy what you need, what you fell short.
They've all canceled those down here. Wood, electric storage heat, every condo in this city that was built in the 80s had these electric storage. They charged up during the night. They were Swedish. They had
Yeah.
bricks, and if you tried to take a shower and went through your hot water, you paid a higher rate to heat it. They've all done away with them. And it was a pure cost. And they're on natural gas. And the court said they couldn't raise the rates. They had to get a significantly lower rate at night. And it's cost, that's the balance we have to keep.
And the balance shifts as technologies change.
Yeah, as it changes, it becomes more normal and has some competition. Because they'd like to do it,
Well,
but we're already complaining about how much every one of those units cost, and they're more than most of us could afford to pay for a house. Okay. So we will have the RPCs in to ask how much uptake they're getting on towns designating areas. And then if any utilities have actually located in those areas. Because if they aren't, then we need to ask the utilities or the companies, developers, why aren't they developing in those areas? What's making them choose a more controversial place, full site of somebody's house or somebody's backyard. And
These the utilities or are these the private companies that are developers?
yes,
They're not the utilities.
no, it's the developers.
Yeah, it's the developer. And I guess you could take a selection of people who have developed solar installations around the state to ask why they choose the areas that they choose and what do they do when they encounter resistance.
Yeah, I think that's a fair question to ask that.
Some of the areas we've got, they choose the land that is the cheapest to buy
Well,
and then try their best to be able to develop the cheapest land.
Or the gentleman who was here yesterday, it mentions, I think, the practical solution, if the resistance is too great, fine, go somewhere, there's lots of land.
Yeah.
Go find another piece.
and he does his homework, he goes around and talks to people. He's got a big place in Randolph, right?
He's got a project going in south of Randolph that he's proposed to create beyond a brown field and to provide it to
Here
some
before,
affordable housing, but that hasn't come out yet, but that's what the plan is.
but he was putting something in around here on one of the interstates. He was in here years ago.
He's been here a few times over the years.
Yeah, and he's put in several projects in this area. Yeah,
He's-
but he does his homework.
And he's walked away from stuff when
Oh, yeah,
said, I don't want to be in the community, doesn't want to have me.
Yeah.
And he's not going broke.
Well, in the maps for housing, the kind of underlying principle is plan for the next 20 years. And a lot is gonna happen in the next 20 years with the climate, et cetera. And so if we can get our communities thinking plan 20 years, not just for your housing needs, but the big changes that are coming, that would be nice. I think it would be nice to fold it in.
and I think towns are still adjusting to the fact that change happened very gradually until this year, and then things.
So they come overnight success.
And it may go back to nothing, or we may have a tornado. So, okay. Obesity bill. We're gonna try and get NCSL to see if they have any information on what other states are doing. There was the New York Times article that Sarah Teachow sent me about a couple states, and the state employees union was limiting it or cutting it out because they are very expensive. And it looks like Medicaid. Nolan said he can't do a fiscal note because he doesn't know the uptake or what drugs will choose or what limitations will put on it. He got the 75 million to Medicaid might be a little high, but was in the ballpark.
Yeah.
And we have a global commitment with the feds, which means we don't get paid per service. We have a level. And some things, we can increase what we pay physicians and that doesn't count against it. If we start a new program, that counts against our level. And 3 years ago, we were at the top, which means we were going to run out of Medicaid money. And so right now, where we've got a fair amount of room, putting in a lot of money might help, but 5 years from now, when we're hitting the top and we find a cure for cancer, it might not, but that's predicting the future, and we don't know. Okay.
I think they're being widely distributed because they work. And eventually, if they're working, they're cutting healthcare costs in a lot of other places. I think the challenge is we don't have enough information because it's very new.
We don't, and We don't have enough information. And we don't, I mean, I've heard appropriations say more than once, you tell me if I spend $1,000 now, I'll save 10,000 in 10 years. But I have to have $1,000 now, and I have to keep having it. And it's never documented that you actually save it. We went through that with autistic kids and getting services. It's cheaper to get services to them from the age of 2 to 5, and then you would have almost no cost in the schools. But didn't work out. Okay, anybody has anyone they want to hear from? We'd like to get these bills out, but I don't feel anybody's really pushing for them, or they just haven't caught a lot of traction yet.
That's a clue.
And yeah, you know, nothing is very exciting. Not to worry, the House is planning either the end of this week or the first part of next week to vote out the property tax bill. And we're trying to get Emily, we've got
She will
Emily,
be in tomorrow at 3 o'clock.
so she's gonna come in and explain to us. And is Julia gonna be there too?
Julia and Kirby.
And Kirby, okay, so we've got our numbers and our legal people. We're basically going back to what the state did, or the Senate did, when we voted the bill out, and that is rolling it in on 5 years. The 5% cap is gone. Schools are, we've got $50,000, I think, or 500 to cover their expenses. They're all gonna have to be published and, you know, notice their budgets.
Are we pushing forward then, the date?
Yes, we will push forward the date at April 15th. They have to
April 15th.
April 15th. So they can do their budgets. And then it's pretty much, we did it on student count. You couldn't gain or lose more than 5% of your student count. This is going on cents. If you lost 12% of the student population, you get 12 cents this year, and then it's ratcheted down over 5 years. And the tax department will do charts so that every school district can see what they're ratcheting down. So it's a,
Who's opposed to that, I wonder?
I haven't heard anybody, I went to my first meeting Monday. And there's a final one Thursday night. But the tax commissioner is sitting right up there at the head of the table, so I assume the administration is not fighting this. And this, I think we
The
decided
big
early
issue
on
still for everybody is how much.
how much they're gonna have to cut. The other one is that school financing bill. We could tell them help was on the way with that. But if they could do it with bonds, and I think the towns with the most need will probably be the most debt adverse. If they could have bonded and fixed the problem with their schools years ago, they would have done it. And I don't know, saying we're gonna pool them and get you a good rate of interest.
One of the questions about bonding is that overall question of what potential effect would that kind of bonding have more broadly than the districts that do it?
Yeah.
And I know if you get into a state situation in which there's a state bond and, based on our bond limit, yes, it does have a rollout effect across the board.
Right.
But if, say, Burlington does its own bond separately, I'm just wondering, is that gonna have any other
Yeah.
effect?
What I heard them say yesterday, and I'm sorry I chased everybody out, so most of us could go to a Fort Cheers meeting, which was canceled as we walked out the door, so they could do the BAA yesterday. What they said yesterday was they were going to group the bonds and put them through the Vermont Bond Bank, so, which would be the
Yep, yep.
municipal, and it wouldn't count against the state. The treasurer's office has done the modeling.
Mhm.
The question is, there's a cost to those bonds. You do have to pay them back. And if the towns thought they could pay them back, even if they got a penny less, rate, they would have done it. Yeah, so we're gonna have to have some money to offset some of that cost to get. South Burlington will probably be fine, but Pelier, depending how we come out of this flood.
Well, the question is, in terms of money, what are they talking about? Is it money that's going to be paid over time to help subsidize the payment on the bonds, or is this any upfront money?
I think it's over time, but that's
And where are we gonna get that money?
Yeah,
They
that's
said
the
no
question.
pay-go.
You said,
They said,
No pay go,
no pay go.
right, no upfront, because they're not sure how it'll fare.
yeah.
Well, I mean, it's just, it's the same reason we don't want to spend, one-time money.
Right,
This is money that's gonna, if you're just delaying the pain, but
Yeah.
you still have no plan for how you're gonna deal with the pain, that is not a good
yeah.
solution.
Joint Fiscal is working on, that's what we said today, money chairs. They're gonna model
Mhm.
a possible help with this
We're gonna
payment.
have another pandemic where we
Yeah.
get some money from the feds.
That would be. Unfortunately, we are the 5th lowest in COVID.
Yeah.
We're pretty low compared, and even at 5th, we only have 32 people in the hospital. People above us have 200,
Mhm.
because it's just larger populations, but I saw that last night.
But that's a good thing.
That's a good thing. We also made good places to raise children. I think we were 3rd or 4th on that one.
They obviously didn't even go to schools.
Well, if we have more children, we'd have better schools because we need more tax.
Well, again, it's a, last time I looked though, in terms of just standardized test scores,
They're not love.
we were better, but then when you took out minority populations because of our low number,
Yeah,
that our results were just about average, and we're spending far, far above average.
yeah, we are not providing any kind of an elite education for our above average spending. And a lot of it is just size. You got a class. There's only 5 kids in the 1st grade. There's 5 in the 2nd.
One school in the middle of the state with one door.
I think I think 3. I think we could put almost every we could have one in central Vermont, one in northern, one in south. We might have to put a 4th in the middle. We just have to transport kids a ways, but compared to other states, they do it. But we are still maintaining local control and the trade-off and all of this. So we've got local control and we've got the Supreme Court mandated equity. It's
I'd be curious on education spending, and I know, we've done some work on it in the past. Of how do other states that have dispersed populations over rural areas, but have considerably lower costs. And then you compare their results to our results. Are there secrets there that we just haven't figured out yet?
Yeah, and we are very progressive in our education. Most other states, I had somebody say, you just gotta put spending caps and tell schools they can only go up 3%, 4% a year.
Mhm.
Um,
I've seen states like that.
yeah,
I mean, the other issue
Yes,
though is what we call education spending. Is that what other states call education spending, or do they have large amounts of that that's considered social services spending and it's simply in another bucket, but they may be spending as much as we are in a lot of the other areas,
about that. And
the way that we account for it.
because a lot of it is social service.
Yeah.
You can't get a behavioral therapist at your local mental health, so you have one in the school. And it helps the kids, and not too many years ago, we expelled kids, other states may be
Mhm.
less liberal, they may expel kids more often. Detain them more often, we've decided that is a good policy, but it does put a burden on the schools.
Senator Brock has an interesting question, and when you're trying to compare numbers, most states in the United States fund their education as part of county budgets, often with
That's right.
county legislators that do that work, and we don't, we do it by towns, and the apples to apples is tough.
It is,
It's defining what we call education spending compared to what others call education spending. And then in any study, you gotta do some kind of equalization, so that you
Unless
know that
you're-
you're dealing with apples and apples.
Unless you're making a political speech, in which case you don't have to do that. You can,
okay, on that note, I think we're going to
Equalize where you don't want to
adjourn
equalize.
for the day, everybody is free to go.